Let's talk about pure.
It's still offline for me.
Wait. Bala, sorry, let me cancel that. Once I start talking, it may take like 20 seconds to connect.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so, yeah, let me just replay. Yeah. Let's talk about pure versus impure functions. So, do you know what's the main difference between a pure and impure function in JavaScript? No?
You told us. Yes. Yes, it's whether you respect the whatever's part.
Yes. Let's do something. Let's create a function. It's streaming live already?
Yes.
Brilliant. So let's create a function called do something. It's not relevant what the function is actually doing, right? And then the function will receive a number, and then the function will do number equals number plus 3, right? So then I'm going to invoke do something function. So I create a variable here called my number equals 5. So I'll try to display afterwards my number. What value will be printed? Yeah?
Is the variable name different?
Yeah? And what?
Yeah.
So that will throw an error.
Yeah. That would be one of them.
Correct. There's a typo, right?
Yeah.
After fixing the typo that I did on purpose to see if you were paying attention, no, I didn't. Right. So what will this display now? They need a return. No, I'm trying to modify the number variable. 8. So according to Jonan, right? I never said I was wrong. Listen. I think that's very sensible. So we have a variable number 5. So then we increment it. So then if we display my number, that should return 8. However, it doesn't. It returns 5.
Yeah.
Let me change the example. I have a boolean set to true, and it will become false. What will it display now?
True.
True.
Yeah.
Right. If I change my number, right, it may work faster. But apart from that, Bala is absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Because of the same reason, right? Let's do another example. What will it display now? So I'm creating a string, right? And I'm changing the value of the string. Hello. You are all right. In other words, it doesn't matter if I override this value of the string inside of the function, right? It works.
So we're not overwriting the value of my string inside the function.
Okay. I mean, not against that. Not against that. Let's keep playing with the same pattern. I'm going now to create my array. Right? You see something, Bala?
Yes. Did you mean to use my string or my array within the function as well?
No. So I'm creating a new variable,
Right.
and then I'm passing that variable to the do something function. Right? So if I have an array, and then I do array.push d, what will my array display? ABC, ABC, D.
No D, because no return. Push impure or pure, that's the question.
But why? Before, with the strings, with booleans, with numbers.
Because in the other
Yeah, that's correct. So arrays are a bit special. Let's see if that's true or not. You see? Now it works differently, unfortunately. Or maybe not unfortunately, but this is something a bit unexpected the first time, right? So strings, numbers, booleans, we cannot change them that easily. But with arrays, look at how simple it is to change them, right? There's another example, my object. So if we do that, what will be the first name of the user? Peter or Mary?
Because object is like an array, like so I'm guessing it's Mary.
Right. So objects in that particular aspect are same as arrays. Yes. Correct. So what that means? The technical way to describe that is, in JavaScript, when we talk about data types, and I'm now oversimplifying things a bit, there are some very deep articles that explain you in detail all the differences and all the types on each side of the journey. But just to keep this simple for now, there are two types of data types, two kinds of data types in JavaScript. First of all, we got primitives. For example, strings, booleans, numbers, all these things, right?
Yeah.
The simple ones. And then we got reference. So it's primitive data types and reference data types. Arrays and objects, mainly. Right? So what that means? That means that if we invoke a function passing a primitive data type, string, boolean, number, it doesn't matter what the function does. It doesn't matter. We know that our value, our string, our boolean, our number will remain untouched. However, if we deal with reference data types and we pass these variables to a function, they are technically speaking allowed to modify them. As we can see here. So, when we talk about reference data types, what are the differences between pure and impure functions? A pure function is, again, I'm being a bit oversimplistic, is a function that doesn't change the arguments that receives. An impure function is a function that does change the argument that receives. So, do something. Is it a pure or an impure function?
Impure.
Why impure, Jonan?
Because it's changing the object.
That's correct. That's correct. If this is my object, this is my baby, right? And I'm leaving my baby with my neighbor, I want to get my baby back as it was, right? I don't want them to change the color of the hair or to change clothes, right? That's a bit a stupid example, right? I didn't manage to try to get a better example, but you get the idea, right? You got something, you're delivering, right? You're offering that item to someone else. You want it back as it was, right? You don't want it changed. That's why generally speaking, it's a bad idea to have impure functions. Because this is my data, I'm invoking a function that may not be even in my control. I may be calling an external, library of React, right? React router DOM, what Poppy explained this morning, right? We can invoke an external dependency. And then what they realize is that literally after invoking that dependency, oh, wait a minute, they have changed the name of my player. What was that? Wrong, right? Impure functions. However, a pure function doesn't really change the original data, right? So for example, if let's try to think about a more realistic use case. So instead of do something, I'm going to call that get new first name, right? So even if I do really want, please you to rename the first name of the user, right? So what we could do in that case, in that very simple case, is I could return that. So what will my object display now? What's the name of the user?
Peter.
It's Peter. That's correct. You see, now I'm offering my object to that weird function. I don't even know what are the details of the function, but I know that my object will be respected. It's untouched. So now, obviously, if we want to access the new first name, we can create a new object, right? So then we can display it. So this is a pure function. It receives an object, it returns another object.
What if you undid and then moved line 9 under line 11?
You move line 9 under line 11.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you got rid of the let. So you just, in line 11, you get rid of let and my new object.
Yeah. Like that.
No, you would get rid of my new object, so.
Like that.
Yes, exactly.
So what's the question?
Now what's it return? Does it return Marie?
Correct. Correct. That will return first name Marie, as you can see. That's correct, right? So that's a pure function because it takes an object, actually it's ignoring the object, right? But we can actually change the example a bit. So we can do object.first name plus some exclamation marks, right? So let's actually use the argument. So if we do that, now that will display Peter with some exclamation marks. But in reality, my object hasn't been changed at all, right? So if I, for example, let's do a console log. Let's display both. The original object is object. Console.log. The new object is, right? We can do that. So that will display two different names. Whoa, thank you for nothing. Yes. Yeah, that should work. You see? The original object hasn't been touched. However, if we go back to the previous example, if we put object dot first name equals Peter, or sorry, object dot first name plus. So then my question is, what will the first console log display on my object? With or without the exclamation marks? without. Why without? Is get new first name a pure or an impure function? So get first name, it's an impure function. But if we add some break lines, at this stage, has my object changed at all? Look, for now, my object, that's still the original one, right? But then, because this is an impure function, right? Why did we get undefined? What's the get first name function returning? What's this function returning? Nothing. What is the return statement? Right? There is no return statement. So whenever there is no return statement, that's a smelly thing. You remember I used to say, please add a return statement. Without the return statement, right, we don't need it to modify the object.first name. So if we display my object, sorry, let me change that. So if we invoke the function and we display my object again, will it display the same thing or not? No. That's correct. That's correct. Why? Because that's the original one. Then we invoke an impure function that changes the object. And then if we display it again, it's modified forever. Right? That's why using impure functions is not a good idea. And remember, if we do want to modify that object, we can hopefully just return a new object, right? So then the function becomes pure, right? So now I'm not modifying the object at all. So what will now the two objects be the same? Yes or no?
Yes.
That's correct. Now they are the same because the function is pure. If we want to do anything with the new object, we can assign it to a new variable here, right? Because the function is returning a new object. So when the function takes an object and returns a new object, that's generally speaking because it's a pure function, right?
Why do you still get undefined?
Correct. Before we got undefined, no, listen. So that undefined is because the snippet itself doesn't return anything. So this is a Google Chrome thingy. So if I type something instead of undefined, right? But just ignore that. Right. Any questions?
How would you exactly know which one is a pure function?
Well, you need to check the details of the function. I can clearly see that function is pure because I receive an object. I have no idea what the object is. I have no idea what it means. I have no idea about anything. But I can see that we are never touching the object. We are just reading one property, but we are not writing. We are not updating it. That's a pure function, right? Similarly, with the array example. So let's play an example. Let's create an impure function and let's see how to convert it into a pure function. So I'm going to create a function called add element to array. So the array, my array is A, B, C. And then I will invoke add element to array passing my array. Right. So if we display my array, and the function is essentially doing array.push D. We saw that before, right? So how many elements my array has on line number 9? 4. You are all right. Is that a pure or an impure function? Pure. Why pure? It's impure, obviously, because it changes the array. I mean, if my array has 3 elements, and after calling a method it has 4, it's impure, right? It's impure. Remember, a pure function receives an input, returns an output, it doesn't change the argument. So how do we transform that into a pure function? In other words, I want to have a function that takes an array and adds an element to the array, but it doesn't change the original array.
Make a new array.
Make a new array.
Return it.
Definitely, we need to make a new array. And the question is, how do we make a new array? Well, look, concat. Who said concat? I like concat. If you use concat, and we return that, array.concat, right? That will create a new array with that element at the end. So that means that I can create a new variable, and I can do, first of all, my array and then my new array. They should be 2 separate arrays. The first one should have 3 elements. The second one should have how many elements? 1. Why 1? Should be 4, right? Concat adds a new element at the end of the array. It gets applied, right? You see? Now, is this pure or impure? It's pure, correct. That's correct. Because I can safely say that I can pass my array to the function, and whatever is going on, my function, my array is still untouched. Of course, if I want to get a new element to the array, I can declare a new variable, and that new variable will have the original array plus the new element. But I'm not changing the original array, right?
I have a question. I was just wondering, so does pure functions,
Yep.
do they have return statements? Impure, no return statements?
Well, that's not completely accurate. So a pure function definitely needs a return statement, because without the return statement, it's not going to return anything. Well, I mean, I'll tell you something. If we do console log hello, is that pure or impure? It's pure, right? It's not changing the array. It's doing nothing, actually. Right? So that's not, the relationship is not that strong. But in reality, in most of the cases, if you have a pure function, it's because you send some data and you want some data back. So the way to get data back is with a return statement, right? And then talking about the impure function. Can an impure function return something?
Yes.
Can we do that? Look.
Yeah.
Is that pure or impure? It's impure, correct. Because even though it returns something, it has changed the array, right? So how many elements my array has?
4.
How many elements my new array has?
3 and 4, sorry.
3 and 4. Why 3 and 4? 3.
4 and 4.
Correct. 4 and 4. Look. 4 and 4. Right? Because this is completely even unnecessary at this stage, right? So we've changed the array. So, okay, then we return the new array that is the same as the previous one. It's like, thank you for nothing, right? Do you remember, I think this is on the intermediate training, there's a question to add element to an array. I think most of you, you've done that, right? That's correct. It works, right? It definitely, that's the trick. But as far as possible, try to avoid these kind of things, right?
What happens if it's a return array that push the...
Correct. What happens if we do?
Yeah.
I get numbers. It's really annoying.
That's very not sexy. That's very annoying indeed. So what's the value of my new array? Look, 4.
Yeah.
Right? Someone in 1995, right, in the crazy 90s, thought it was a good idea to return the length of the array when you use push. That's completely pointless, right? Why 24 years later we still have that? Well, because of compatibility reasons. If one day the JavaScript community that at that stage was one person agreed that push should return one element, that will stay like that forever, right? That's why now at least we have concat to, you know, minimize the impact of this horrible API.
It's only with push we have to write return underneath.
Some of the other ones like shift.
It's all the impure ones.
Yeah. Yeah. So that depends on the function. We need to obviously understand the API of that function to see what it accepts and what it does return, right? It's hard to predict without reading the docs sometimes. Anyway, any questions so far?
Using this array that push in return to calculate length will be a bad practice, or it's okay?
Say it again.
Like using return array that push to find out the length of the array, will it be a bad practice, or it's okay?
If you want to return the length,
Yeah.
but to me, if I want, okay, if the function, I don't know, I struggle to read that. So if I do want to get the length, I will do something like that.
Is there any way to pass
By what?
by value through a parameter?
Say it again, to pass by value what?
Say, let's say I'm passing my array
Yeah,
to the function.
yeah.
Is there any way, you know, in the parameter itself, you know, just like the, if we say, you know, the rest operator,
Yeah.
Is there any kind of operator that we can use to pass by value?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Let me answer Dave first, and then we'll go back to this topic. So if I want to get the length of the array, after doing that, I'll do that. Is that pure or impure?
Pure.
That's pure, right? That's, to me, the ideal way to get the length of the array. And then back to what Bala was asking. No, unfortunately, if we have an array, we're exposing the array to the function. That's why it's the responsibility of the function to make sure that the function is not modifying the array. If you are a bit extremist in that respect, there are some utilities in JavaScript to, for example, clone an array. So we could create a clone function to create a copy of the array to make sure that even if we are passing, right? Do you want to do that? So if we create a function clone, and function clone receives an array, so here we can do return array.map value, return value. I hope that will create a copy of the array. It may work for this very simplistic case. So now, even if that function, evil function, is doing array.push v, so if I'm right, and I'm not 100% sure, now my array should have still 3 elements. Here we go. And obviously, we need here to return the modified array with 4 elements. You see? Look at the difference. If I pass my array as it is, how many elements my array will have afterwards? 3 or 4? 4, that's correct. Why? Because that function is touching, is extending the original array. So it's up to that function to not to do that. So we should ask whoever wrote that function, please, hey, we used to be friends, don't touch my array, right? And then they will hopefully replace push with concat. But if because of whatever reason that's not possible, or we don't trust our colleagues, or I don't know, because we want to make sure that regardless of what happened here, our array remains untouched. No, look, I've created a function to copy my array. So in other words, before giving my array to that function, I'm creating a copy. You see? because I'm passing a copy, I keep the original one for me. So now, if I execute that again, you see, the original array remains untouched. Listen, that function is still impure, right? The add element to array function is still wrong, but at least I've minimized the impact of dealing with impure functions. Any question?
Doesn't that have like a memory, cost?
That's a separate thing. Yes, of course, yes, because here we're creating a new reference in memory to a new array, either one or the other, right? Poppy?
What if you created variables within the functions? Would that affect whether it's impure or not?
If you create a variable, no, right. So if you create a new variable inside of the function,
Yes.
like that, and then you push my element to the array,
Yeah.
is that now it's still impure, right? Because we are pushing. But if we use concat, is now array.concat, sorry, is now add element to array pure or impure? It's pure. The deal, the important thing are the arguments. Are we changing the size of the arguments?
Are we? No.
No, because we use concat. So of course, a pure function doesn't mean we can't create variables. Of course, we can create new variables and stuff like that. The rule is please don't change the arguments. Right? Any other question?
Yeah, is there any kind of passing by reference of the basic data types?
No,
There isn't.
no. If you send a number, we can do that again. So if we have function add number return, so we can do number equals number plus 3 return number. If we have that, and then we invoke add, so let my number equals 5, add my number, and then we display my number. So what will be the value of my number? Undefined. Why undefined? Now, what would be the value of my number? 5. Correct, right? So there is no way to if we have any kind of weird paraphilia and we want that function to change our values, how can we do that? Well, we can wrap that into an object, for example. Can we do that? So then can we do so what will be now the result of displaying my number.value? 8, that's correct. That will be the way we can access.
But you have to do it that way. There's no operator.
No. That way, right? That's a bit weird in my opinion, but hey, that's technically speaking possible.
But always it should be done as object. It should be created.
Or an array. Yes, because objects and array are basically the two data types that are passed by reference. Right? By reference means we are not copying with the primitives, strings, booleans, numbers, we're copying the original value. That's why they can't modify them. But with objects and arrays, we don't copy the values. We create a reference, a pointer in memory of your system, right? So then last question for you today. What happens if I have my array, again, with 3 elements, A, B, C, classic, and then I do, look at what I'm doing now. This is array. So, what's the value of my array? How many elements my array has?
4.
Depends on what equals does.
3.
3, 4,
4.
4. I think you are wrong. It's 3.
Yeah.
Ooh. That's unexpected, right? Why 3 and not 4?
It's taking the let my array.
Yeah, but listen, what's the difference, right? What we did before we did array dot push d, which is essentially the same thing, right? That will give us a new array of 4 elements.
Oh yeah, so we're pushing into the existing array there.
Yeah,
With the assignment, we're assigning a brand new array.
that's correct. Be extremely careful when you use equals with arrays. If we push, essentially what we say is, I have a reference to memory where my array is, point to that element in memory and add a new value. However, if we use equals, we are changing the pointer in memory to where the array is. So we are breaking the relationship between these two functions, right? So now, interestingly, how many arrays do we have? 2, correct. We have our original one, and then we have a new array that has been just created because of using that, right? Similarly, of course, if we do that, you've seen that lots of junior developers try to initialize an array like that. That's wrong. That's wrong, because if we do that, the array still has 3 elements. We can't initialize arrays. I've seen some of you doing in conflicts, that's number 14, I believe, this dot state dot TV shows, something like that. We want to see if an array is empty. That's wrong. That always return false. Why this always return false? Because that's a reference to memory, and that's a new array we just created with a different address in memory. We can't compare arrays in that way, unfortunately, right? Because of that, if the question is, please create a function called empty existing array using impure function. If this is my beautiful function name, how can we get an empty array here? You'll get that question in a job interview sooner or later, right? So please, splice. You could use splice, yes, but will you be able to defend it? You could use splice. I'm not against that. How will you use splice? Array.splice. Array.length minus 1.
Yes, all index.
That's wrong. That doesn't. No, it's not minus 1. It's you need to put 0 minus 1, and then no, it's not minus 1. And it works, right? So even though it's correct, no. Even though that's correct, you see it's correct, right? Eventually, after a few iterations of trial and error, we found the answer. However, there is a simpler way to do that. How do we initialize an array? We know that we can't do that, right? We can't do array equals empty array. That doesn't work, right? So the trick here, what you should remember, and this is a tricky thing in JavaScript, you can override the length of the array. Look. Oh, that's a trick in JavaScript. Look at now. Boom, sexy. Right? So once an employer asks you, how do we reset an array? You know, how do we empty? How do we clear the content of an array? In dot length equals 0. They are expecting you to do array equal square brackets. Wrong. Right?
So is that impure?
What do you think? Is that pure or impure? Listen, I got an array of 3 items, and after calling this horrible function, my array has 0 items. Pure or impure? Impure, exactly. Exactly, we are changing the array, right? So we've learned these 2 things today. First of all, difference between value variables that are the primitives, strings, objects, numbers essentially, and reference variables that are objects and arrays, they are passed by reference, right? We are setting not the data, but a pointer in the memory of our system, right? And then when we have reference variables, objects and arrays, we've learned that we can create pure functions, are the ones that don't touch the array we are passing or the object, and impure functions are the ones that are unfortunately modifying our data model. Anything else?
So if you can do that with arrays,
Yes?
how do we do that with objects?
What do you want to do? You want to initialize an object?
Like, yeah, make it blank.
Right.
Map it to something zero, like empty.
So you, thing is, if you have an object with a equals 1, so that will be my object. And then I have an object here. So essentially we want object to be, I don't know, to be honest. I'm sure we can do it. I'm sure there's a trick to empty an object. Well, I mean, no, I do know. I do know. Whoa. Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, I have one idea. We can do something quite interesting here. We can, first of all, iterate over the list of keys of the object. How do we iterate on the list of keys of the object? Object keys, correct. And then I'm going to use for each. So for each key, look. Boom. Clear. Right? So what we do here is give me the list of keys of the object, and then for each key, delete the key. So we're deleting individual keys of the object, right? That's the correct way to do it. Of course, if you do object equals that.
But you can't delete it value as well, delete the A as
Why
well.
did that do that?
How come you deleted the
You
A
haven't
as
got
well?
the key, you haven't got the key value.
How come? Say it again.
When you deleted key,
Yeah.
it also deleted value.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, because that's the deal, right? We want to have an empty object. How do we get an empty object?
What if we delete object value of the content?
What if we delete object value? What is the value?
Instead of A,
Instead of A.
I mean instead of key, you write value.
Right. What will happen now? The same as typing that, right? What's value, Aisel?
No, values, I mean.
Values. The same as ace cells. What's values? Where is that values coming from?
A, is it not value?
Well, I guess we value.
Right, guys, please refresh the beginner's training. Objects. How do we access a dynamic property of an object? Like that, with the square brackets, right? So in reality, what I'm doing here is literally the same as typing delete object.a. I'm wiping that from the object. Look, you see? What happened if I got b equals 2? No problem at all. I can do delete object.b. The same thing. What happened if, we can have many properties, right? As part of that object. So instead of hard coding delete,
No, sorry,
correct.
I confused key with the keys. Sorry, that's why.
Right. So you see the way we can iterate over the list of keys of the object, and then for each key, just delete it. Right? That works. I need to be honest, I need to check if there is any shorter way to do that, if there is any trick, I don't know, I cannot tell you, but to me that would be quite safe.
If it's say a list of names and I just want to enter the names and the data, but I want to keep the keys, then what would be the way?
I didn't get the question. Dave.
Okay, so we have keys and values.
Keys and values, yes.
I want to keep the keys.
How to keep the key and what are the values?
I'll get rid of the value.
Okay,
Say empty list, but keep the template.
like that. Yeah. Makes sense, right? Cool. Anything else, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The array example that you had.
Yeah.
It was a trivial example, but I assume JavaScript just cleans up all the memory. You don't have. There's no memory implication of just hacking in there and putting length equals.
No. When you put the length to 0,
Yeah.
so JavaScript is essentially wiping the content of the array. That's fine. Yeah. Just one more thing, guys. Do you remember when I created the clone function? Be careful with that. To copy an array. Copying arrays in JavaScript is challenging. It's more complicated than it seems. If our array is very simple, if we got, for example, if we have 1, 2, 3, I can clone that easily. But instead of 1, 2, 3, I have an object here named Peter. This is not that easy to clone. Because in reality, I will need to do recursion to remove each individual property or to copy each individual property of the array. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry, because on the expert training, there is a topic that explicitly talks about recursion. Right? So I don't want to make it more complicated. Just be aware that cloning or copying arrays and objects, that's fine if we have an array of primitives, numbers, booleans, strings. Same with objects. With objects, it's fine if we have one dimension, name, Peter. But if we have a nested object, that's complicated as well.
A nested array.
A nested array, of course, exactly the same thing. A nested arrays, right? So just be careful with these things, right? This is a classic Stack Overflow question, right? So if you have some time, go to Google, how to clone an array. There is a lot of literacy about the implications of cloning arrays and objects. Literacy.
Illiteracy.
Yeah.
As in loads of questions.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, I will be ready in a minute. Bala, Richard?
Thanks.
No? Cool. So that was it for today. Thank you, guys.